Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. You're listening to a new Redefining Security podcast. Have you ever thought that we are selling cybersecurity insincerely, buying it indiscriminately, and deploying it ineffectively? Perhaps we are. So let's look at how we can organize a successful InfoSec program that integrates people, process, technology, and culture to drive growth and protect business value. Knowledge is power, now more than ever. HITRUST is a leading data protection standards development and certification organization that strives to safeguard sensitive information and manage information risk for global organizations across all industries and throughout the third-party supply chain. Learn more at hightrustalliance.net.
Imperva is the cybersecurity leader whose mission is to protect data and all paths to it with a suite of integrated application and data security solutions. Learn more at imperva.com.
And here we are. You're very welcome to a new episode of Redefining Cybersecurity here on ITSP Magazine, where we look at how to operationalize InfoSec programs to not just make the security team happy, but to actually support and secure the business. And today we're going to be looking at GRC, Governance, Risk, and Compliance, and what those programs look like, what's all involved, how big have they grown over the years, what's all encompassed within a GRC program, and you guessed it, how to operationalize that in the business. And I'm thrilled and honored to be joined by Benny today. Benny, thanks for being part of the show.
Thank you for having me today, Sean.
And you have a lot of experience I hope to tap into. Maybe if you can give folks a view into who Benny is and what you're up to.
I'm currently serving as an information security officer for a bank. American State Bank out of North Dakota. I've been serving that capacity for a little over 2 years now. And my prior background was in IT, system administration, these kind of things. So I've fairly evolved in the IT world, and I'm fully into the cybersecurity environment industry. It's really passionate. It's a really interesting industry, and it's rapidly evolving. 4 or 5 years from ago, if you told me that the things that is happening today will be happening, I would probably say it's not true.
That's right. It's ever evolving, and there's a lot in there. And if I could, Benny, maybe get your view of what GRC is today, and maybe taking a look back in the past, how has it changed? With the cybersecurity lens on, it's easy to look at GRC through that lens and kind of get a picture of what it is. But broader picture, what is GRC today in your view?
I think today, in my view, as you say, governance, risk, and compliance. I think it's the intersection of the three of them that you can come up so that you can better the security posture of a company. Governance, you start thinking about policies, procedures, how to establish good policies to embolden and enforce security in your environment, in your industry. Risk, risk is ever evolving. One thing that still shocked me today is the SolarWinds and the Kaseya incidents last year, the supply chain attacks. Again, these are risks that these are kind of incidents that we'd never thought of 5 years before. It was interesting how the bad actor was able to leverage those and do those supply chain attacks. And then the next component is compliance. Always want to make sure that your industry, your employees, everybody is complying by those policies. The team in charge of implementing those controls are actually implementing them as they're supposed to. So I think it's an intersection of all these three things that makes a company's cybersecurity posture stronger. So that's how I would define it.
Yeah, I love that. And it might be a slight tangent, but I want your view on this because there's a pretty significant movement for ESG. So it's environment, sustainability, and governance. If I'm
Exactly.
not, I'm not mistaken. And
Yes.
so I'm just wondering, it's one thing to look at policy from a compliance perspective to say, are we are we HIPAA compliant? Do we have a SOC 2? Do we have high trust? Do we have whatever it is that we're
FedRAMP, all this
right?
kind of.
All the different regulations
Yep.
and perhaps even industry standards that we have to follow. But your view of this in terms of what organizations look at for GRC, does it extend beyond that? And I'm thinking about how we engage with customers, how we look at our carbon footprint, and do we start to see GRC playing a role in ensuring those policies are enforced in our IT ops and perhaps even security ops?
Yeah, I think we definitely there's a big move toward that direction actually. I think just as you mentioned, ESG is becoming more and more the standard for analyzing a company and look at the performance of a company. They look at ESG. I think GRC is probably going to become also another standard to evaluate the, if I want to say, the sustainability and good risk of a company as well. Um, Matter of fact, I think I was reading an article today where um, it was a vendor that was posting that the SEC is looking at adding CISOs to executive level management into publicly traded company. There's a reason for that. Again, is to just like they're looking at ESG, they're also going to be looking at GRC to look at the risk exposure of those companies when it comes to cybersecurity, because it's more and more it's costing those companies a lot of money. So I think there's a push for having GRC as a new standard to evaluate the risk in companies.
Yeah. So sustainability, the broader sense of that, I see a lot of activity there in relation to GRC as well. So your definition of what the goal of GRC is. Why should an organization have a GRC program, and what's the ultimate outcome for having one of those?
In my opinion, I think that for a company to have a GRC program, in my opinion, would be to better measure the risk exposure of that company. That's one. Also to assess the cybersecurity culture or the security culture of the company. You know, um, and most importantly, I mean to see the overall health of the company, sustainability of the company. How likely are we today to fall to one incident, for example? Is it gonna bankrupt us or not? There has been companies that literally bankrupted from one cybersecurity incident because of how much it had to cost them to get back on the feet and recover and all that stuff. So I think, and also when you talk about merger and acquisition, M&As, for example, that's another area where I think GRC is going to come into play, because as the financial people are looking at the financial information of the company in the M&A, they also want to look at what are some of the inherited cybersecurity risks they're getting from that company as well. You know, if I'm buying a company and I'm going to have to spend about almost as much money that twice that to get that company on the certain security level, I think maybe the deal will be called off, because I'm buying a company with bad cybersecurity posture, with bad patching practices. They haven't patched their servers for 5-10 years. With maybe Windows 7 still operating in that company, in that environment. All of those things are risks that I, as a new company acquiring it, I'm gonna inherit from it. So I think GRC is definitely um, those are some of the importance, in my opinion, and some of the um, reason why people need to take it really important carefully. Is really important.
So a risk assessment, and you mentioned a few points. So where am I vulnerable in an organization?
Yep.
Perhaps tying that to some threat analysis. Where are the active threats, and are they in my industry or in my region? Are they targeting components in my environment, maybe not directly, but
Yep.
they're looking at Windows 7, and I have Windows 7, so therefore I'm at risk. Beyond that risk assessment, though, what else should a GRC program include? What other elements or components should an organization consider as part of the plan?
I think another element also is could be these days I like to use the term business resiliency instead of business continuity, because once you put in your controls, once you've addressed your vulnerability, you patch what you need to patch and all that. But we also have to, we shouldn't forget that this is a rapidly evolving industry. Most of the time, bad actors find out about vulnerability before we do. So we have to start thinking about our business resiliency. So identify critical business processes, identify critical vendors, those kind of things. See how the company um, can be resilient in case of an incident. Also, how long can we afford to be down without causing too much damage to the bank operation and all that stuff. So that's an area that I think should be really important. Business resiliency, business continuity, incident response, that area as well.
So are those? So I appreciate all of those components. Do you see those as part of a GRC, or are they programs that are adjacent to the GRC? Do they kind of
As
feed each
well,
other? What's that picture look like?
because when you want to look at, it depends on individual approach. Most of the time, people tend to put, especially the business resiliency component, outside of your GRC. But in my opinion, it should be an integral part of GRC. Because if you, let's say, for example, if you look at the compliance portion of GRC and you start talking about SOC 2 and all that stuff, part of SOC 2 is testing controlled against the CIA triad, confidentiality, availability, and
Integrity as well.
integrity.
Yep.
So once you start talking about availability, then the discussion about business resiliency kicks in and all that stuff. So I think, in my opinion, it should be an integral part of GRC, in my opinion.
And so is this? I guess two questions. I'm trying to figure out: is there a program manager that kind of runs the program for GRC, and I suspect they have kind of a matrix management responsibility to pull in the right folks to collect the data, analyze the data, report on the data.
Yeah.
What have you seen work in terms of properly staffing for a team and setting up the leadership for the team to succeed?
What I've seen so far is kind of having, as you said, program managers for each component, and then having all of that reporting to maybe a CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, or sometimes some people call them the Chief Risk Officer or something like that. So, but most of the time is having program manager in charge of each segment or silo of GRC, and then it's much more granular, get to the details, and report of things back up. That's what I've seen so far.
And how does the plan get? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say that another thing that is coming more and more is outsourcing that whole component. So, because it can be time consuming, resource consuming. I mean, most of the time when you look at it, it can also cost some resources. So some companies just outsource that function, the GRC function, and just have whatever third party it is do it and get them the result, and then maybe the company can analyze it and then make their own conclusion. So I've seen it both ways.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned the outsource, because one of the things I was trying to figure out is how much intimate knowledge of the organization does the program team need in order to succeed with the plan. Can a general person savvy with business and compliance and generally with security do a good enough job to say this is what you need to focus on from a GRC perspective, or where does the intimate knowledge need to come in?
I mean, from my perspective, I think if you're gonna be making sure that certain controls are in place, if you're gonna be in charge of verifying that they're being followed accordingly, if you're gonna be in charge of writing a policy, tell people not to do certain things, you need to have an understanding to the point. I mean, almost a technical understanding how those things works, so that you can speak to it. That's the way I look at it. Other people in the industry might disagree with the way I look at it, but I'm always of the thought that if you want to speak of something, you need to understand and know how it works. And the best way or a good way to know that is by having most of the time a strong IT background. You've evolved in the IT environment. You've implemented controls. You've from sysadmin to IT manager and those kind of things. You've been on the operational side. You understand how business function works and all that stuff, and then you can effectively come up with some of the controls, some of the GRC things, policies, and all that stuff. But if you have no idea, you have no knowledge on the IT side, I think I'll make an argument that it will be hard for you to be an effective GRC person.
And I'm thinking the ultimate goal is to protect the organization from risk, and
Exactly.
and to do that, it's not just by having a team that's running around collecting information, right? Somebody has to analyze it,
Yep.
make some decisions on, well, this business engagement is too risky. Maybe it's a third party we don't want to do business with, or we're just toying with the idea of building a new application, and this is what it by virtue of that, we now have to be PCI compliant, and that means we have to
Yep.
follow these policies. So those types of decisions have to be made. How do you see the GRC team kind of bridging the gap between business operations and business development and the leadership team so that they can understand, okay, we're about to make some pretty hefty decisions for the organization. Here's the data we have. What data do we need, and how are we going to act on that now?
Uh, so basically, the GRC team guiding decision makers on making those decisions. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. So how do they have that conversation to say we here's what we need to know, here's what we know, and here's the type of decision you need to make now?
I think maybe a good component of that is that's probably why it's important for a company to have a good risk appetite and set, just as you just said, here's what we need to know. We have the information. Maybe here's where we need to be. Um, Maybe we need to have a risk acceptance if we decide to still make that move because it's going to be from a positive from an operational perspective. It's going to make our process more efficient. Okay, let's look at some mitigating control in place, for example. So I think my opinion on the GRC personnel shouldn't be rigid as to if it doesn't meet X, we're not doing this. It's a no. I think at the end of the day, we're trying to make the company secure, but also we're trying to. The goal of the company is to be efficient, to make money, to profit. I don't think we need to be in the business of making it harder for them to make money. I think we should do everything we can to make it easier, but secure and safe. So it can go from maybe having a risk acceptance. So if something goes out of risk tolerance, maybe we need to accept that. It can be anything like having adequate mitigating control in place also, things like that. Um, that's the way I look at it. I think usually that's how I approach situations like that, and instead of being radical.
Yeah, and I love the point of mitigating controls, because it's I don't know, easy. It's one thing to look at the organization and say, let's take M&A for example.
Yep.
By bringing that new company in, they've run their operations a certain way. now folding them in, they're connecting to our network, they're connecting to our customer database, they're connecting to our employee Active Directory, and those things introduce risk.
Yep.
Is that really necessary to achieve the goals of that merger and acquisition? Or is there a way through mitigating controls to maybe bring them in, but keep them on a separate network, or integrate the employees, but boy, do we really need to understand our roles? Do we have to redefine our roles and responsibilities in our Active Directory to, I'm just making stuff up here on the fly, but I guess my question to you then is, do you have any examples of either through an M&A example or some other risk analysis as part of a GRC program that says we analyze that risk, we decided to accept it, right? To your point. And we, to kind of minimize it, we've implemented some mitigating controls rather than just blocking it completely. Do you have any examples or stories you can share?
I mean, I can go into the details, but
no names to protect the innocent, please, of course.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just gonna talk through some of the examples that I've seen. For example, in the case of an M&A, just like you brought it up, the GRC team goes into play, analyze a company. Most sometimes probably gonna run script into that company environment to see what are some of the vulnerabilities out there in the environment, all that stuff. Present it to the buying company, for example. Here's what we see. Here's the risk and all that. You can either accept the risk or we can think about mitigating control. If we want to go that route, bring the IT team into play. Okay, how much is going to cost us if we bring that company in to mitigate all that stuff? Ballpark, I mean, between upgrading servers, buying a new piece of software, maybe if you have a SOC team out there that's going to ingest all those new logs and all that stuff, they're probably going to charge you more for that because you're bringing in new things. So quantify that from a numerical standpoint and bring it up to executive management. Here, how much it's going to cost us. Well, an argument could be made that instead of, let's say we're supposed to buy that company at 12 million, it's going to cost us, I don't know, close to another 4 million so that you guys can be compliant. Then let's talk about revising that initial 12 million acquisition, for example. There has been cases where people have talked about it that way. There have also been cases where people look at the cybersecurity culture at that company. Are the employees of that newly acquired company, is the cybersecurity culture good? So because if you have a bad cybersecurity culture and also a bad environment, that's literally two things. But if the employee there actually are pretty good, they don't click on links left and right, they tend to be really solid and all that stuff, and it's just the infrastructure that we need to upgrade, that could be another discussion too. So that's some of the example that I've seen and how people, I guess, dealt with it. Most of the time they'll end up acquiring, but is there going to be some clause into the contract and all that stuff, and also there will be some restructuring clearly. Who is going to be in charge of IT this time? Who's going to be in charge of cybersecurity, information security? Because two companies are merging, two IT team, two GRC team. We need to have who is going to be in charge of what and all that stuff. Especially if you're acquiring a company with bad IT culture and cybersecurity culture.
Now, I want to talk to you about scope because I heard a story in the past of a company acquiring another one, and the company was heavily regulated and met a lot of the requirements to be compliant with certain regulations. And that company was successful in doing that. They were able to do their assessment, their analysis, their reporting, show the controls, speak to the culture, demonstrate that they were doing all the right stuff, bring them now into the big organization. And the auditors didn't want the big organization view. They wanted that business unit view, right? And it didn't make sense to the auditor to have the full scope of the entire organization. They just wanted that. So I found that quite interesting. And I'm wondering your view on how is it important? And if so, why is it to have business unit views or scoping for specific areas of business. Maybe one is in federal government, so you kind of slice it off that way. You mentioned FedRAMP, right? So maybe you have a view of different slices that then feed a larger GRC, or what do you think on that?
You be more specific, because I guess it's hard to follow where you're headed with that.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, do organizations benefit from only having a large full scope GRC program, or do you see a bunch of mini GRC programs sliced and diced based on business unit, region, and then fold them all up into one?
Oh, well, I think it's going to depend on the size, complexity, and environment of that company, because sometimes if it becomes too complex, it's probably going to be hard also to track. It's going to be hard also to hold people accountable most of the time. So you probably want to separate it, having multiple silos. But as far as what I've seen, most of the time, it's just lumped together, and then we have just specialists within the team. So we have some maybe threat hunt specialists, some vulnerability specialists, some also controls, and all that stuff. That's what I've seen so far. But I think it mostly depends on the size, complexity of that environment for them to make that decision.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And I want to get to the controls, because to me that's where the rubber meets the road, if you will.
Yeah.
So we have a plan, we have a risk appetite, we make some decisions, and we say we're going to move forward. This is the path we need to take to do so safely, and that translates into IT ops changes, perhaps some business unit changes. Maybe they deliver the product in a different way or the service in a different way. Talk to me about translating the plan into action.
Ooh. Like, you mean what I've seen in the industry, or?
Yeah. So how does the GRC team delegate and assign action items to people, right? Because I guess by virtue, they don't have any management responsibility for a lot of the people they're going to ask to do things. So how have you seen them succeed in getting controls in place and changes in business operations in place, things like that?
I think that's why also, to be an effective GRC person, you need to have some good project management skills. Be able to set goals, with attainable goals, with clear expectations. Also, most importantly, being able to be a good collaborator, because at the end of the day, I always say, whether you're from the GRC team or you're from the IT team operation, we are all looking to make the company better, right? Same goal, common goal, different topic, different item we're working on. So here's what we need to do. IT, how can we get it done? We talked through it. Here is what we came up with as control. We think we need to implement all that so that we can be at X level. The goal is by this date, we need to be here. How can we make it done? And have that conversation with IT team and all that. Get the right resource people, assign them what we need to assign with attainable goals, and also do some continual follow-ups with them as well. If it's a monthly meeting, to see where we at. If it's a weekly meeting, to see where we at. I think these are some of the things that should happen. But I think usually the approach of, I'm the GRC person, I need to be in charge, and you guys do this. I've never seen it working personally. So, and it's not gonna work, because at the end of the day, the people implementing it are not in the GRC team. So you want to have buy-in. Right. That's why you need to have a good collaboration. We all have the same goal: make the company better, make the company strong, sustainable. So let's have a discussion. That's usually my approach on how to address some of those things.
Yeah. And it's a delicate balance, I would imagine, between here's the risk we're trying to avoid, here's the safety net we want to put in place. How do we, so here's where the balance comes in. How do we work together to see that through versus go implement this control?
Exactly.
So how is that through?
Trust but
I mean,
verify.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So I'm wondering, I'm trying to think through like team meetings and how does some of that come into play? I mean, if you think about a merger and acquisition, perhaps that's a few quarters in the making, right? You kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel on that one ahead of time. You can hopefully plan accordingly. But if it's a let's see, um, yeah, a war broke out. Right, and we have team members in this particular area of the world, and we now need to protect that part of the business. You don't have much time to think about a scenario like that from a GRC perspective. So two different extremes. How do you see teams kind of managing the process? Is it a standard meeting every month, every quarter? Is it weekly? Do you have the option for um, critical critical issue meetings where you call people together that says, all right, our disaster recovery team and our business resilient team identified this. We need to see how it impacts GRC. Let's go.
Yeah.
How do you
I
handle
think.
those extremes?
Oh my God. I think. Yeah, weekly meetings. Is really good. Weekly meetings, but also monthly meetings with like managers or business process owners. So those can be on a monthly basis. And one thing that has been really great, especially after we all went through the pandemic over the past 2 years, is the use of Teams, Microsoft Teams, and all those platforms. We can track a project, all that stuff. We can write it, assign who we need to be assigned to, have email that automated. I mean, there's multiple tools to do these things. So I think being able to efficiently leverage all those project management tools will also help. People documenting what they're doing, adding things to it, and all those kind of things. But yeah, I think that those are some of the strategies that one can use when trying to achieve all these things. Frequent weekly meetings, leveraging project management tools to document everything, and most of the time things will go fine. But always collaborate. Always come in from a collaborative perspective, collaborative mindset than anything.
And so many tangents I can take with this. I think, yeah, I heard somebody mention to me in a recent podcast that if you don't have a task assigned to somebody, it's not visible and it's not going to get done. So,
Exactly.
so just talking about it is enough. I love that you mentioned using the tools and project management tools to kind of
Yep.
make sure things do get documented and people and teams are held
Exactly.
accountable. So at the end of the day, Benny, I guess a two-part question. What can an organization expect to receive as an outcome or achieve as an outcome? Have you seen or had experiences where the business was able to innovate and thrive and grow with a GRC program in place versus an organization feeling that they're just being held back?
I think I've seen them always grow and always evolve, actually, because it has always helped executive level, it's most of the time, actually understand the risk involved with the company. Board of directors, CEOs, they actually understand some of the risk involved with the company. Most of the time, well, let's say in case of a bank, for example, if we're talking about risk, most of the time they're not, as a bank, really seldom the topic of security risk comes into play until the recent maybe 5 years, and also because it became in the news. But usually the talk about risk is mostly from this financial economy perspective. But now putting um, some of the IT and cybersecurity risk in front of board, in front of executive management, actually give them a full view of the company. Um, it's true if you make a bad loan today, here's the risk involved, here's how we're going to quantify it. But also on the other side, if an employee click on something and then we get hacked and there's a ransomware, costs us $10 million to recover from it, um, that's also a risk. How are we going to get the money to do that? And most importantly, when they're asking us to pay it in Bitcoin, where are we getting the Bitcoin to pay them?
A GoFundMe account is a good.
Exactly. You know, are we gonna start talking to an insurance company about it? Okay, if we are, well, is it even covered? Those kind of things. So it allowed executive management to actually start looking at risk from that angle as well, because as we are using information technology, IT tools to make business process efficient and fast, it also comes with the risk associated with that. Think about when we just went with COVID and all that stuff. Everything is being remotely. People can sign loans all remotely. You don't even need to go physically to a bank and all that stuff. Technology tools that allow us to do that have a risk involved with that. And it's important for management and executive level to understand that. And for them to be able to understand it is having a strong GRC team of GRC leaders in that company.
And I was just wondering, so as a CISO, do you ingest the GRC outputs and communicate that to the executive leadership team, or do you see value in having the GRC team present that to the executive leadership team?
Um, I have seen it both ways. I've seen it where um, if it's a small company, usually the ISO or the CISO wear the hat of the GRC person as well. So small entity, usually he wear both hats, CISO and GRC. He communicate, ingest it, and then bring it up to the executive level for decision and all that stuff. But in the bigger companies and all that, you have those two separated: the CISO, the GRC team, and then operation the IT team and all that as well. So I've seen it both ways.
Yeah, because I know we often, as a function within the business, a security function within the business, struggle sometimes to make the connection between security vulnerabilities and risk and business risk and the value to running the business in a different way, perhaps. So do you see GRC perhaps bridging some of that gap between firewall rules? we stopped 100 attacks today, and presenting information more in line with what the business leader wants to hear?
Yeah, I think I see them actually. Yeah, that's a pretty good example that you just gave. Um, Having the GRC people play an important role in that part, because most in a day, the good GRC people have a good understanding of business function as well. So they usually, or most of the time, have the ability to bridge the gap between technical and non-technical people, right? Because they have to be able to understand the technical side of things. So understand the firewall rules and all that stuff was happening when the IT people tell them what's happening. But I also have to be able to translate that into a business language for a CFO, a CEO, or a board member sitting in there and ingesting those information. So I think that's where most of the time either the GRC person or sometimes the CISO come into play, being able to bridge the gap between the non-technical and technical people as well.
Yeah, love it. Love it. And final question for you, Vinny, is around measurement. Maybe some advice for some fellow CISOs who, I don't know, don't have a real formal GRC program in place, or it's just pieces, parts. Maybe they certainly look at compliance. They probably have some auditors looking at risk. Maybe their insurance company requires some assessment there. So advice for a fellow CISO to really bring their program together. What should they focus on?
I'll probably say start with the basics. Start with the basics. First thing is your IT risk assessment. Look at, for example, what are the vulnerabilities. First, actually start with a strong IT inventory of what you have in your shop or in your industry. Once you have a strong list, as again, those are the basics. What are the risks exposed to all of those things? Once you identify the risks, what are the controls that we can put in place to mitigate those risks? Um, if some of them are probably to the level where we need to accept the risk, make sure that it's escalated to the appropriate authority in your um, and a company so that the risk is accepted. If it's the CEO that needs to sign it, CEO. If it's a committee, send it to the committee. That stuff. So establish it. That whole process need to be dictated by your information security program. So a policy somewhere that tells you how you're going to be doing those things. So once you have all those policy in place, then you can maybe start moving toward the compliance side of things to see if you can be SOC compliant, FedRAMP compliant, and all that stuff. Start with the basics: patch management, asset inventory, and the rest will grow organically from that. That's what I would say.
Nice. Don't bite off more than you can chew.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, when you look at it from a really simplistic mindset, almost 80 to 90% of the attack is happening through phishing. The phishing have a payload attached to it that is probably going to try to exploit a vulnerability. So if you start with the basic, identify your IT systems and all that stuff, patch what you need to patch, upgrade them, mitigate controls, I think you'll take care of most of the issues.
And I venture a guess that some of the basics from the controls perspective, mitigating controls perspective, would be very valuable. So like network segmentation, MFA, some of those things we always talk about would certainly help, I would imagine.
Yep, exactly. Make sure all of that is also guided with a strong policy in place.
Yep. Excellent point. Well, Benny, it's been a pleasure talking to you about kind of the journey of building and establishing and managing a GRC team and getting a plan in place. I appreciate your insights, and perhaps you have some links of some resources, some tips and tricks, if you will, for folks who are more interested in learning more. So I'll ask you if you can share those, and we'll put those in the show notes. And any final thoughts before we wrap?
I think it was really resourceful conversation. You actually good to have those conversations so that you help us think outside the box most of the time, because at the end of the day, you're going to work and focusing on your normal task and routine. It's nice to talk to people outside the industry, get different perspectives, and they allow to think about certain things that we don't usually think about. So I'm really honored to be here today, and it was really resourceful.
Thank you, Benny. It's a pleasure chatting with you, and appreciate everybody joining us either live or on demand for another episode of Redefining Cybersecurity here on ITSP Magazine. And I believe our next episode is coming to you live from RSA on June 6th. We're going to be looking at InfoSec programs. It's a big topic, a lot involved there. So I'll be doing that live during RSA conference, same time that Monday, June 6th. So thanks everybody for joining us for this conversation, and keep on operationalizing cybersecurity.
Imperva is the cybersecurity leader whose mission is to protect data and all paths to it with a suite of integrated application and data security solutions. Learn more at imperva.com.
HITRUST is a leading data protection standards development and certification organization that strives to safeguard sensitive information and manage information risk for global organizations across all industries and throughout the third-party supply chain. Learn more at HITRUSTalliance.net. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Redefining Security podcast. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.